make it clear this is not mandatory, but this is informational. I tried to make it. So, because school is closed, I cannot require any mandatory activities. This is more of an on-the-side informational session and discussion. Okay, great. So before I jump into my planned discussions, is there anything that you would like to discuss or a question you would like to ask? Clarifications?
I guess I would just like you some general guidelines on using Python. I've used RStudio before, and basically for this homework, what I did is just copy it from your either the presentation or the videos. But I don't know if there's a particular website or any material that you recommend for us to review, just to kind of get an understanding of how the language in Python is different from RStudio. That would be something that will help me.
Yeah, that's good question. I feel that there are multiple levels of prep, and there probably isn't one source that's going to satisfy. And I think different students have different backgrounds, and that they have kind of different need for prep. But lately, I've seen more and more videos on YouTube, and they typically they have these features that are new. Typically, YouTube videos are short, even on these technical terms. Maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes is long enough that attention span will not work well for that. But I start to see more and more videos coming up in my recommended videos that that is very long, typically 3 hours or longer, and they typically call them the videos. They call them crash courses for data analytics or data, maybe the Python data analysis, and those may be worth a shot. So if you search Python data analytics, you probably will find some of these videos. Definitely not want to watch all of them, because you will see overlaps. Maybe it's good to get some ideas of key points from those videos. And inside the video, I think there will be plenty of opportunities that you can skip. Not skip entirely, but skip a few seconds. On a computer you can do that. Push the right arrow key, you skip for 10 seconds. Things like that. So a 3-hour video, you may end up only spending 1 hour to get the main message. I would expect, I didn't go through them per se, but I also skipped a little bit. But I would say they cover two things that will be beneficial especially for Rosalia with a similar question, is what's the key Python syntax features that beginners want to pay attention to? That will save a lot of time when you try to adapt the code from video and tutorial to your homework. A couple of features that are the same with R is there is no end of line symbol in the code. There's no semicolon, there's no comma, things like that. End of the column is just end of the column. Whenever you start a new line, Python engine knows that that's a new line. RStudio is just same as R. RStudio stands for R. So I'm really talking about difference between R or similarity between R and Python. Yeah.
I was going to ask, and does Python or Jupyter in this case, is there a way where we can visualize or see the environment? I know in our studio there was a portion where we could see the environment and the list of objects that were created. I'm not able to view this unless I have to run the code every single time. I don't know if there's an easier way to show those objects that are created within the Jupyter Notebook.
I know your question exactly. In Jupyter Notebook, no. There is an alternative provided by Jupyter, which is called Jupyter Studio. You would expect, right? that comes after RStudio.
RStudio.
With Jupyter Studio, the interface is very similar to RStudio. You would expect to do many things similarly. I made a decision not to go with Jupyter Studio because over there you do have some benefits of visual touch of the data set, but you lose some others, like quickly find and replace some letters inside a cell. You lose. I mean, functions like this and functions like these are important for me, at least for when I adapt codes, because when I copy paste, I copy codes from a different project but doing the same thing. I want to quickly replace the variable name at different places in the same cell very quickly. I can use that function to do that very quickly. In Jupyter Studio, you cannot do that. But other features like cells, I think they are the same with Jupyter Notebook. So mostly shortcuts that don't work well, or there are not as many shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts to do different things in Jupyter Studio as with the Jupyter Notebook, which is more HTML based. Yeah. So that's one. But try it for yourself, and if you find it work better for you, for sure. And for that, I'm afraid that a lot of the learning curve with using that piece of software, the unique side of that, they will have to go through that. But still, try a couple of times and judge it for yourself.
Would do. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But the reason for your question is important. I would say with R, yes, a data set is there. When I click it, it will be loaded in the memory, right? It will be loaded as a spreadsheet. In front of me, I can look at the rows. I find it more of a habit difference rather than a fundamental difference. And the reason is, in most of the cases, if the data set has a lot of rows, you almost never need to look at all of them. What you really are getting from the visual is just to look at the variable name and a couple values of that variable. And also the lack of or let's say it only requires a click of mouse. You don't have to specify the column name. That's right. With just one click, you have the entire data set open in front of you. You can scroll left and right to see different columns. That's right. And on that side, that's convenient. In Jupyter Notebook, when the data set has many columns, when you, for instance, call the first few rows of the data set, only the beginning maybe 7 or 8 columns, and the 7 or 8 columns on the far right will be displayed with values. All the columns in the middle will be kind of omitted because it's just the way it does it. It cannot show everything, otherwise the scroll bar will be super long, right? So that's the decision they made with the interface. So to print a few values of a particular column in Jupyter Notebook, you would have to specify which column that you're trying to look at. So that's one lack of convenience in comparison. But otherwise, if the data set is fairly small with 15 or maybe 12 variables, the only difference is create a new cell, punch in the name of the data set, the data frame, and hit run, Control Enter, or hit run. And you will see a snapshot of the first 5 rows and last 5 rows of all the columns of the data set. So that's the only difference. And after that, you can delete that cell. So once you have the habit, it really doesn't really matter in terms of convenience, or that's only a matter of habit. So you can definitely get used to it, and it's not a bad thing, because I think with where the analytics is going, Python is a must. R is kind of optional. So you kind of making that switch is more helpful for the career in long term. So, but very good point. And I will continue to assess that situation. It may not change within a few months, but over time, maybe Jupyter Studio will get better. It will have more keyboard shortcuts and other functions. And that's when probably it's ready to switch. But, this is always relevant. Any other inquiries, questions?
So just kind of expanding on Rosalia's question, I'm just going to speak on behalf of the supply chain students in general, because I believe most of us had some kind of reservations in doing the coding part of the homework, because like Rosalia mentioned, I think for the most part what we did was we looked at your videos and saw how the coding part was done and kind of tried to replicate the codes in the homework as well. So for example, on the exams, I know the exams are open book, but within the given time limit for the exam, would we be expected to kind of do the same for the exams as well, like we did the homework?
Yeah. Tell me what you would expect.
So I just don't want the exam time to kind of limit the ability for me to go and check answers, especially the coding answers. The conceptual part was still okay. Of course, we read most of the material and we could answer the questions, but the coding for me honestly was really difficult, and I couldn't, for some questions like the questions at the end of the homework were really tricky in terms of understanding the code. And I believe, of course, questions like those would be asked on the exam. So I remember I spent a lot of time on those questions alone. So I wouldn't be able to do that on the exam. So that
right.
kind of
So let me say this. That's a very good point. But let's be realistic. First of all, this course being part of that curriculum of supply chain management degree, there's a point, right? And if students don't agree with that point, then it's kind of there's some way to appeal to that, but we want to touch that point. So given that the supply chain degree will like students to be able to at least know how it works with Python, the most popular and useful programming language for beginner business analytics professionals, that is kind of a must. That's a necessity. And with Python, coding is always necessary because there's no way around it. There's no visual, there's no click and drag. And with these assumptions, then the best way of using these resources would be to learn how to adapt codes from internet. You can find a lot of codes and tutorials from internet. But the skill of how to adapt, how to understand those codes in the first place and adapt those for your own purpose, that is actually what's really, really needed for the students. And this is exactly what this course is training for those not particularly Python enthusiasts, but really have to just go through this and learn the basic skills of working with Python on data analytics for the purpose of machine learning. That is what has driven the design of these homeworks, other than those knowledge points, scaling, missing values, those kind of topics. Other than that, the challenge that these homeworks, as well as the exam, is creating for the students to go through is exactly training how to adapt codes for your own purpose, right? So you can think of, so my suggestion is that you can think of these homeworks as if they are exams and nail it. Nail it once doesn't nail it twice. Twice doesn't nail it 3 times. Until you can comfortably nail these homeworks within, let's say, one homework question. It's hard to say how much time is allowed, but I'll have to review the specific exam questions. But exam does put some time pressure on, the way that you work it through. So try to be more comfortable with homeworks, and you will definitely have a better time in exam process. So use the homeworks as a test environment to kind of, hone your skills, basically. And the design of the exam is almost exactly replicating the challenge of the homework. It's just change of business case, change of the target. Now everybody knows what a target is. I can clarify what that is in a minute, but problem is different, target is different. All of these should be within the common business scenario. Variables are different, including the target is different and input variables are different. ID may be different with different names and different values, right? But the logic is all the same. There should be only one target for this problem. You need to identify the target. There should be one ID column here. It may not be called ID, but something else. You need to know how to swap the right part of the code for this new data set, and then do the same thing, basically. And that is what the homework as well as the exams are asking you to do. And the final project would be to put everything together. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. So basically, we just need to focus a lot on the homework and try to understand most out of the homework to kind of do well on the exam.
Right. Not the particular case per se of the homework, but more of the process. Process working through that. And the videos, as a resource, you can always use that during exam as long as you don't play it out. But that would be a severe toll on the time.
Yeah.
So so the best use of video is to work through homework for the first time, and then reuse it for the second time, practice it to the point that you either have notes or you remember the mentality that you can live without the videos, and still you're able to do the homework. Right.
And just building on that, are you going to, like, after grading the homework, are you going to submit the not submit, are you going to post the answers to the homework questions as well?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
I always do that.
Yeah.
And so that gives you the standard answer.
Yeah.
Right. And you would expect standard answer will be in the same format of what the video plays. So if you see any inconsistencies, of course, let me know. Sometimes I may have implemented a better trick in terms of codes, and you probably don't understand it. because I didn't explain it in the video. And in that case, I'll be happy to schedule a call with you and explain the new codes. I don't think there should be many, if any, right? But yeah, that's the point. And don't remember. Okay, another trick that you can play if you do have time and want to test yourself and improve yourself is you can manipulate the data set that you have for either the video or for the homework. You change things around. You change the variable names and make it difficult for yourself and do it the same way. Work it out with the changed variables or changed data set. If you don't know how to do that, I'll be happy to show you. So that kind of creates more exercises for yourself. That's a very good question. I think other students will benefit from hearing all of these. Right. The ultimate goal of this course, at least for from the basic expectation point of view, is not to anticipate that you will master Python in the end. No, that the purpose is understand the model and be able to recreate these models with a good understanding of the business scenarios and business implications, how to make decisions from the results, and as well as how to diagnose the models with that background knowledge of how the model works in the first place. You will understand machines learn. You will work through every step of the calculation on the coding level so that you know how machine learns. Machines simply follow scripts. That's what they do. They do it faster and more efficient. And so that in the end, you can connect the dots between the problem in the data set and what do you suggest the business do, right? So everything in between, you'll be able to connect those and optimize the solutions. That's the purpose. And Python is just a tool. As long as you can use that for this purpose, that's the purpose of the course. Fantastic. We spent 25 minutes on these important questions. So let me go ahead and do some. There's really one big point I want to point out, but and others are smaller points like coding mostly. If you went through my advanced programming course, you already know what I'm going to talk about on those. I would just point out. I'll bring out the whole first homework, and I'll point out a few things in that code, so that you know to make sure that you realize this, or if you see that, have an intuition about what that does, but didn't know really how that worked, I can expand a little bit on that, and after that we'll convert it to discussion again and solve more questions. Or since I will have the homework one on the screen, then we can zoom into more coding level questions, and it'll be convenient. So let me prepare my desktop here. I need to open my slides and my remote session as well. Hang on. Okay. 1 second. Here. Okay, so let me share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, great. So the point I want to make here, mostly because I don't have time in class to talk about that specifically. I think I mentioned it a little bit, but not extensively. So since we have the time here, when I talked about the training test play, I mentioned that it's somewhat similar to cross-validation. And training test split is like twofold cross-validation, but there are other variations of cross-validation, such as tenfold and fivefold, or more commonplace. But they actually serve different purposes, even though the process might seem similar, where you take the random partitions of the data set into several sets. Twofold would be to make two, and then one is training and the other is validation. So that's similar. Train test is the same operation, but often their purposes, and especially in the process of managing the project flow, it actually serves different purposes. And I like to talk a little bit about that. And since this is recorded, everybody will be able to see it. And normally if I were to talk about it in the classroom, I would draw on the screen, but I'm locked at home. I can't go to my office, and my what do you call it, stylus is my writing board is at school, so I cannot do that. I made some apps here. This is the Christian process, and inside the data preparation phase, it's mostly where the train test play or cross-validation is located or is operated. And the cross-validation has a little bit of overlap with modeling because cross-validation is really supporting development models and evaluating the models and provide feedback so that more improvement can be made to the model and quickly move on to different models. So here, I'm going to expand what's going to happen here in the data preparation phase after the project has been well understood, objectives are defined, data set have been collected, or at least, is being collected, and then you are ready to work on the data. So in this case, you have let's say you have all the data available here. The whole thing that the project team thinks that's relevant and will be able to support this project, we call it training data. Yeah, there are different names. People can call it training data, but training data might be kind of confused with another term that later we'll introduce. So I'm going to call it training data, with the notion that it's not a train, it's not a railroad training, but training data is a bigger thing, everything that we have. And in this stage, you do some surface cleaning, including cleaning up the labels. Sometimes, if categorical variables have labels, make sense. Also get here value format. Sometimes date values are stored as strings, which is not really ready for analysis. So do those. These surface level cleaning include those that should not really change the information in the data set. These are more, I would say, they don't change the information there, but they do affect how conveniently we can use Python to process these data. So these operations, you can apply them on the entire data set. Maybe other surface level cleaning would be to combine different sets to make them bigger data. That might be also included here, but not much. You are not expected to do too much here. You especially are not expected to do too much deep level cleaning or fixing issues such as missing values or skewed distributions. You're not supposed to do this here, because doing that here actually affects your ability to protect the integrity of the test set. When you do those manipulations or transformations, you are intentionally removing some of the surprises in the random partition test set, which limits your ability to conduct faithful testing of the model, right? So if you remove those real life surprising situations with data, random values of the data, the test set is really not becoming the real test set. So keep that in mind. And then after that, you're ready to do train test play of the whole set, the training set. And the result of that is you have a test set, and you also have a training set. I call it training to be different from the training set. When people say training set, we typically understand that this is the set that you are going to train the model on entirely. You will use the entire training set, not the training set, but the training set is dedicated for the models, and the model is
You're muted, Professor.
I'm muted, and that's a surprise. But I was afraid that my internet would be cut off for the rest of the night. That would be disaster. But looks like it's a small glitch, and recording has started. Great. I guess it will put it together at the end instead of being 2 videos. But anyway, if it's 2 videos, both of them will be available. So let me get back to the slides. Not seeing it. Where's my slides? Hang on. See. There you go. So I'm talking about the training set. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
we can see.
So the training set and train set quote is trained data is different. Hopefully the difference is clear at this point. So once you have this, you want to be very careful with the test set. Hold on. In order to, in order to protect the integrity of the test set, here you really do not want to explore too much of the test set. You don't want to do a lot of visualizations or analysis of test set, because doing those are basically learning from a human point of view. You, the analyst, is learning information about the test set. And I think as soon as you start learning about the test set, your knowledge about that is going to creep into the process of developing the models. So what does that mean? If your model has some knowledge about the test set, it's going to do better than without it, right? So the test set performance of the model will be artificially inflated just because you knew something about the test set. And that would harm your model's out of sample generalizability capability of the model. And in the end, who are influenced negatively, it's still the model, and whatever the implications that, whatever the implementations that you use the model for. You know, if you use the model to predict revenue, then the model will not be as accurate than if it didn't know anything about the test set. So I think that the point is very clear. You don't want to do too much analysis, or maybe not at all. But one thing I suggest that you do is still the hypothesis testing with the train and test set that we talked about and that you did the homework, 2 homework questions on. That doing that will help you at least be sure of one thing, that the test set is healthy, the train test split is healthy, so that again, you increase or enhance your confidence on the integrity or healthfulness or informativeness of the test set. You know that the test set and the training set are structurally similar. And that is, I would say, as much as you want to learn about the test set, but that is really not something that you are learning about test set, because test set being similar to the training set on the key variables structural side should be expected. Otherwise, the test set is not a good test set. You want to throw it away and do another train test split. So doing the hypothesis testing is not really learning new things about the test set, but you're confirming what's expected. And stop there. Do nothing more. Focus on the training set for the entire modeling and evaluation endeavor at this point. But there's one more thing you want to do. When you pre-process the training set, you do a bunch of things that are critical to help you enhance the capability of your best model. And when you do those, you want to also replicate the process on the test set. But there's a tricky and subtle difference. When you, let's say, when you imputate the missing value on the training set, you have to get some kind of statistics about the column in order to impute those missing values, say the age of the customers. You have a data set of 10,000 customers. They are 101%, which is not a big issue. It's common missing value scenario. So 1% of the data points on age are missing. you want to imputate, meaning you want to fill in those missing values with values that you think would be a best guess of those age values if you knew the value, right? So the standard approach would be to use median imputation method. You calculate the median age statistic, the median statistic for the age variable for the rest 9,900 customers, and use that statistic to fill in the 100 missing values. And so now you want to also do the same for test set. You want to imputate the missing values if there's any missing values on age variable in the test set. But be very careful here. You're not supposed to calculate the median of the age variable in the test set and imputate with that median. You're supposed to use the same median that you use to imputate the training set to fill in those missing values in the test set. Why? Because when you calculate the median statistics here, you are learning something about the test set. You're not supposed to do that. So that logic is super important. Without learning about the test set whatsoever, otherwise you risk, inflating the performance of the of your model, while in fact your model is doing maybe much worse than the result that you see. Any question on this point? Even though I repeatedly emphasize this in this course and the other SAS business intelligence course, still students make mistakes. It's just, it's because it's so tricky. It's so tricky. After they have learned everything on the training set, finally it's time to do the test set. Oh, do the same thing. Calculate the statistic and fill it. Easy. Nope. A trap. So, can't emphasize enough here.
Professor, can you explain again why you would fill? Why wouldn't you just leave it blank?
Oh, that's a good point. If you leave it blank, and if the variable age is somehow being used in the final model, then the model will not be able to calculate a prediction for the case. So you have to fill in the missing values. So filling in missing values is going to be necessity for almost all the cases. Unless there's one situation, if the variable, if let's say in the original training data, the age variable has severe missingness in terms of if there are 40% of the values are missing, you're only able to see a value for 60% of the data point. In that case, you probably would gain more overall by throwing away the age variable, by not using it at all. Because if you try to imputate the values, you're not using enough data point to calculate an informative statistic, which you use to impute the missing values. The statistic is kind of biased based on limited data, so you better not use it at all. So that would be the rare cases where filling in missing data is not worth it, and better skip it. But here,
do you always have to either skip or fill it in, or can you just leave it with a lot of missing?
Leaving with missing is, unfortunately, for machine learning algorithms, for anything, statistics is not helpful. If the variable is being used, then that case, even though that case, let's say this customer, everything else has values, it doesn't have age. If age variable is useful in the model and the customer doesn't have age, you cannot calculate anything for this customer. So that's why filling in the missing, which is called imputation, is still very important. Yeah.
It's very important for the training set, even though you couldn't just leave it blank in the training set. And then I can see why to get a prediction from your.
Good point. Right. It's a judgment call. If, let's say,
if you leave it blank, does it assume it's 0? Like, would it weight
No.
the
Assuming
average
0
low?
would be the bad practice, because that would
Okay,
be.
so that's not what you're trying to avoid.
Right. So the algorithm will not simply ignore the missing and assume something. It will not do that until you tell it to do so. And the moment that you tell it to do so, isn't it imputation? Exactly. So by imputing the missing values, you're telling the program to assume what it should be assuming for those values. So that's what imputation is doing. Right. Good question though. I realize that there's one aspect of it that's not clear. That's because I'm kind of deep in that programming process. But anyway, so that's the point. I think that should be clear. And after doing all the data pre-processing, you are ready to now take the cross-validation partitions of the data set. If let's say we go with tenfold, then chop the data set randomly into 10 partitions and use 9 of them at a time to train a model, and use the rest one partition as validation, let's say. So we have within the training set, and under a tenfold cross validation, we have 10 iterations. Every iteration we have a train and validation bundles. And so you iterate this for 10 times, and then you calculate the average or maybe distribution of the model performance, and you can compare it with a different model. Then after that, you go through the iteratively, and then choose a model. Yeah, Lily?
Yes, I have a question about cross-validation. You mentioned, I think, before that we don't use cross-validation on the test set. So if we're just using that on the training set, so is there any other method that we are using to do validation on test set?
I think that might be a misunderstanding here. When you do the cross-validation, you have different partitions, and you iterate through these partitions. Each time, one of the partitions is the validation set. So you use the other 9 partitions as training materials, train the model, optimize it, and then use that one partition, the 10th partition, as validation. So that serves the validation purpose really well, because you didn't use that partition to train the model. The model is only trained on the other 9. So that's one iteration. Then move on to the next iteration. You switch the validation set partition to another set and use the other 9 for training. So every time the model is trained, it's evaluated on a partition that's not being used for training. So the purpose of tenfold, instead of doing only twofold, where you split them into 2, do the training on one, and do the validation on the other, is also because of random luck or bad luck, right? If you only partition it to 2, like twofold, it's possible that that one of the set, it's possible that the split is not good per se, and the validation set is just having a bad luck. So that will put stress on the training process, and that's not a very reliable estimate of the validation. So when you have tenfold, you can take the average of the tenfold validation performance, and that would be a better estimate. Law of large numbers that will converge to the mean. So that's the purpose. But the purpose of the test set, what's the purpose of test set? The purpose of test set is so that after you have done everything, you have done training and cross-validation, you finally found one model that kind of does it better overall. And in this process, you want to double make sure the model is going to do fairly well on a data set that you didn't even do any pre-processing. So that would be the test set. Test set would be the most genuine field test environment for the model that is, within the same context of your business problem. If the model, typically after doing a rigorous training evaluation process by following the standard procedure, the model is typically going to be good or good enough. So you use that model to test on test set, it's just going through a routine. The result will be not so different from the tenfold cross-validation process, but it might be slightly worse. But that's okay, that's understandable because there are some surprises here. But again, this is another safety net to make sure the model can get the green line. So that's a purpose. So here you don't want to allocate too much data point into the test net, because the only purpose this is making is for one use, basically, for the last security gate, to make sure the model is not doing terrible. Other than that, you want to allocate more data point on the training set, because the model will learn tremendous amount of information from here. And then comes the question: what's the golden split rule? Do you split 20-80? Do you split 50-50? That's a good question, and that depends on how much data you have. If you have 1 billion data points, for sure, allocate 1 million here. That wouldn't be too much, because that's only 1%. But you have 1 million data points to honestly test the model. That's good enough, and you have the rest. I guess how many? 1,000,000,009 million data points for the training set. You will have enough, I think. But if you only have 1,000 data points, what can you do? That would be a tough call in situations like this, because when you have fewer data points, you cannot afford to have too few data points in the test set. Otherwise, it defies the purpose. Let's say the extreme would be you allocate 1 in the test set and allocate 999 to the training set. Yes, you have more data to learn, but the one case in the test set is not really testing anything. So you have to make some judgment calls. But again, don't try different threshold points. Make a choice and stick to it. That would be my best opinion, my best suggestion here. Okay, so this point is kind of complete. Any questions here? Nope, great. The next item I planned is to go through homework 1, some of the codes in homework 1. So let me stop that sharing and let me share another screen. Let's see. I'm going to share a remote desktop. Okay. Let's see how that works. Do you see Jupyter Notebook?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, great. So this is homework 1. And I like to point out a few code examples and explain what they do. I think I like to explain what these are. And this is mostly relevant to Python beginners. So when you slice columns in a data frame, inside Classroom, I showed codes where you didn't use any of these methods, but simply by using square brackets. Square brackets follow the data frame, name of the data frame, like somewhere, let's see, like here. Let me zoom in so that you can see more clearly. So like here, this part of the code is trying to slice the column of churn in the data frame, df churn 1. And that is entirely legitimate. If you're slicing one column or two columns or several columns, use this notation. But only if you're slicing the whole thing without filtering anything. But as soon as you want to filter anything, this is not adequate. You will need to rely on two methods. That would be, this is one of them, .lock. The other is .ilock. The only difference is an additional letter I after the dot. Pay special attention to the notation here. For both lock and .lock, it's followed by square bracket instead of round parentheses. Typically, methods use parentheses, and you put arguments inside the methods to specify what to do with them. But with lock and .lock, they are special. I think they are the only methods of data frame or series that use square brackets. And the reason is pretty intuitive. .lock or lock are special methods that are particularly used for slicing. So as long as slicing goes, almost all the open source languages use, with R as well, right? With slicing, it uses square brackets. So that's why lock or .lock uses square brackets. But for beginners, that might cause some confusion if you haven't thought about that yet. But after you go through this exercise, hopefully you realize that there is a tricky difference here. Okay, so lock and lock or ilock, both of them, the purpose of them are specifically for filtering when you do slicing. You want to slice, but also you want to filter. You don't want to take all the rows. You want to, put some conditions in place. And that is really the purpose. So here, I actually can skip the lock because I'm not doing any filtering here. I'm using the core, COR, which is a data frame that contains all the correlation statistics by running a correlation analysis on the variables of this data frame. So core data frame includes the pairwise correlation matrix. And by getting the column based on the column names, I get the, by the way, I realize I am filtering here. Here, in terms of slicing, you want to pay close attention to how many square brackets are there, right? And with the number of square brackets pair, you also want to make sure if there are any comma in there. So I don't know if this is too maybe too abstract. Maybe I want to fire up the Python to demonstrate specifically. Yeah, let's do that. So command So let me demonstrate specifically what I'm talking about. With slicing, you're always slicing from, almost always slicing from a matrix form, spreadsheet kind of like data object, that's data frame. And sometimes you're slicing from series, which is one-dimensional, one column. But most times, it's helpful to think of a scenario as being a two-way spreadsheet, right? So typically, we would import pandas as PD and import NumPy, and that's it. So I hit the keyboard shortcut, which is Shift and Enter at the same time. It will move, it will run the current cell and move on to the next cell and put the cursor inside or start the editing mode. So that's convenient for editing a blank Jupyter notebook. Okay, so I'm talking about a data frame. So let's make some quick data frame. Let's see, data frame. Okay. Generate some quick numbers, or let's do generate some quick numbers range or NumPy.a range. Let's do 4 by 4, so that's 16. Reshape into 4 by 4 and accept all the defaults. Okay, so that's our data frame, right? So when I do the slicing, let's say the column names are 1, 2, 3, 4, row names also 1, 2, 3, 4. I think they are numbers. So when I want to slice the first column, that should be the first column, right? This actually doesn't help with illustration. I better change that the labels into actual letters so that it's clear they are, make sure they are not numbers, but they are strings, labels. That should be better with our purpose. So column should be list and make it from A to D, but for columns. Now, so we have 4 columns, A, B, and C, and D. I want to slice the first column here. So it's actually interesting. I made that mistake. Could somebody tell me what is this error? I'm trying to slice the first column, but why is this an error? Name A is not defined. What does that mean? Or what should I do to fix it?
Put a single quotation.
Single quotation. Bingo. Reno, you really learned the stuff. You really. I'm proud of you. Very good. So slicing the first column is like that. And keep in mind that there's one pair of square brackets. What does that mean? There's one pair of square brackets, and there is no comma inside. So there's no specification of 2 dimensions. There's only 1 dimension. So the result will be 1 dimension. You can actually do this. Let me replicate the same thing here, but see what I do. I want to add one more layer of square brackets outside quoted A. So I can do this trick in Jupyter Notebook. I highlight these and I hit the left square bracket, see what happens. It adds a pair for me. So that's a really good trick. You want to use it more and more. That helps a lot. Otherwise, what do? By the way, I just hit Control Z to go back. Okay. So what do you do otherwise? You hit here, and there's the pair is filled in for you, and you have to delete it move to back and add the other one. And it replaces the existing one, and you have to add another one. That is all the hassle. Instead, you can simply do this. You can do this as well. Hit once, and it adds a pair around it. So that's good. So what does this do? I'm slicing the same column, one column only, but I'm using 2 layers of square brackets. It actually extracts that column and convert it into a data frame, which is making it a 2-dimensional. So let's see. See the difference? This is more like that. The printing format or printing style is more like data frame, because this one actually has 2-dimensional. It is 4 by 1, but that's the data frame. And here, by simple printing, which is not in the, I guess, there's no meta formatting here. This is plain formatting. This indicates that this is a 1-dimensional object. And we can take a look here to know the dimension or to know the shape of it. It's 4 and nothing. So it's 1-dimensional. But when you say the shape here, it's 4 by 1. That's different. Okay, so that's great. 2 layers of that is extracting one column and convert it into 2-dimensional. But the double layer of square bracket serves more purposes. For instance, if you want to take more than 2 columns, but they are not connected together, you cannot use a slice. So you have to use a comma to connect them. In this case, you want to pay special attention to the structure here. You have inside the outer bracket, you have an inner bracket. The inner bracket is actually telling Python that this is a list. So you are extracting a list of 2 columns with the column labels A and C. And the outer bracket is the slicing notation per se. So the double layer of that bracket, not both of them are slicing, only the outer layer is slicing. So when you do that, you will see 2 columns, A and C. So that's that. But think about this. What is this? You have one bracket, one pair of bracket. You have the slicing notation there, but you put a comma in between. There's no list notation. If you say this is list notation, then what is the D doing? The computer will be confused. The computer will assume this is slicing, and you are trying to slice 2-dimensional. That's what the computer is thinking. The computer is thinking you are slicing the row with label A and the column with label C. So that's the row, that's the column. You're trying to access a number there. This won't work. For one thing, that's more like selecting a value. That's more like filtering. And filtering will require using that dot, right? You cannot simply use slicing to do the filtering. And also, there's no row with the label A. So both will fail you. To do that correctly, so let's try to extract or select number 10 here. Number 10 should have a row index of 2. It's a third row, but row index is 2. It has a column label of C. So the correct way of doing that, and by the way, the row numbers are almost always number instead of inside the quotes, so they are not strings. And that is closer. Second row, or row with index 2, column with index C. But again, I have to specify here. So here's the tricky part. You can use ilock or lock. Which one do you use? Whenever you have labels in anywhere here, when you select the value for. If at least one of these are labels, C is a label, you have to use C. You have to use lock. Lock is for literally calling the name of the column or row. So this one should work. We get 10. Great. But how to use ilock? And what is ilock exactly? Ilock follows the same structure. You have to specify rows and columns. But with ilock, you are using the index positions. What does that mean? This row has a row position of 2, 0, 1, 2. That corresponds with the label, but a lot of cases this is not coincidence, but really intended. So with ilock, you should put in the same value here for the row is 2. It's the third row with a row index of 2. But with the column, you also have to put in the index position of this column, which is 2 again, 0, 1, 2. Ignore the labels. So when you put in 2 here, you get the same thing. Now I feel that I've explained everything I want to with the difference of lock and ilock, the purpose of them selecting or filtering, or related, and the difference with slicing without ilock or lock. Is there any questions? Nope, great. So let me go back to this this homework. Let's move on to the next point. Sometimes a lot of times actually, when I print the output, I'm not sure if I have it here. Let's search. This is not exactly what I want to talk about. Okay, not much. So let me just demo it, on the fly. But by the way, I just now I clicked letter B or key, the B key, A, B, C, D, B binary. When I hit B, it creates a new cell beneath. If I want to create a cell above, I click A. So that's some tricks there. Double D means to remove or drop the cell. Okay, so when I do this often, print. Let's say Python is, and I put a curly bracket here. And then I typically have a variable is, and I put var here. And then you would have to put an F in front of that. And when you print that, it will not say Python is Bauer. It will say Python is fantastic. So the pair of curly brackets is a programming feature of the printing function that allows you to dynamically change what is going to be printed out. And you can leverage that to do on-the-spot programming there, right? So you can do even more things. You can manipulate the variable, and Python will process those codes here before it actually prints out. But all of these will have to require that you have the F string there. If you don't have the F string, it will just print literally whatever is in there, right? The var as well as the curly brackets are not replaced. I have to do this F string. And I can do more. I can, for instance, do this. I can take that variable, sorry. I can take that variable, this is a string. I can do some manipulation before it actually prints out. Can you guess what's going to print out?
Uppercase. Fantastic.
Fantastic. yeah, it's a fantastic, like, real, really big deal. It is to me, actually. So this is what I'm going to talk about. And other related is that I typically, so let's do this. I want to print something like this. So I'm converting this to Markdown, and I'm using Markdown commands. I want to print something like this. Python is fantastic. 2.0. Okay. So that's what I want to print out. I want to have 2.0. But I have a number. It's 2. 2 is an integer. I want to literally print out this, but I want to control the format of that printing of the number so that I don't have to add the 0.0 per se. So how do you do that? Of course, num needs to be put in here. If we run that, we have fantastic 2. And let me just fix that punctuation there. It's 2, not exactly what I want. I want the number to show decimal point. How do I do that? I can use format of number to manipulate that. So here it's a decimal, so it's F. F refers to floating point, and I'm specifying 0.1 decimal point. The number following the point before the F is number of decimal point you want to print, and before that is the total number of digits, including the decimal point that you want to allocate for this number. Here, including the 2 and dot and 0 is 3 width. So this is going to print what I want exactly. Sometimes you want to, I mean, this is just off the topic, but sometimes you want to reserve the number of spaces before 2, because sometimes you have a row that has a small number, otherwise other rows have a large number. You want their decimal points to align well, okay? So you want the numbers to all align or be aligned to the right instead of to the left. You can increase the space allocated here. So I allocate a lot of space here. You'll see a large gap between fantastic and 2. That's the difference. So let's say if it's not 2 but 200, and you'll see the difference, 200. So the decimal point is aligned perfectly. I guess this is only for those nerds, including me, who just want to control everything exactly where they are. This is this is something for fun. Anyway, that's what I really want to talk about on the coding. And since I have the homework 1 here, is there anything that you want to ask about, particularly the coding? But if you do have questions about the conceptual questions, for sure. Is there anything that you want to ask me to explain or demonstrate or whatever relevant to homework 1?
Have you posted our grades on it yet? Have you graded it?
Not yet. I'm trying to catch up.
Okay.
But when I grade, I'll leave very detailed comments whenever I see any issue, or even if sometimes it's not an issue. You have seen my feedback. I'll be very detailed.
Right.
And also I will post the solution anyway. So be sure to compare. See my please read my feedback, understand them. Any questions, let me know, and then try to fix the problem your way, and then compare your solution to compare your answer to the solution.
So I know, am I muted right now? I don't think so. I know that a lot of people or not a lot, maybe 1 or 2 people had a question about problems, I think 12 and 13, because they were it seemed like trying to do the select. I'm trying to look back and see what it was. And I kind of interpreted it differently, that we didn't need to do the select and do the in-depth work that you had done in your example. I just didn't do a select statement at all.
What select are you referring to?
I'm trying to find it in the code. I guess because I didn't do it, I can't find it.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe, well.
When you were choosing which columns to use, maybe for the voicemail plan?
For the z-test? Voicemail plan here? You see my screen?
No, the writing is too long.
Wait, do you see my screen?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, so this is the last question.
Yes.
Right. Let's see. I think I did talk to Reno, and I found out that I realized that the video actually demoed how to do t-tests across all the columns, and by using a for loop. And if only relying on the video, then you would have to kind of rework the process and adapt the codes for really the purpose of only testing on one column. And for beginner, that would be challenging. I realize that. And so the best example for these two questions are actually the slides demo codes. So in the slides demo codes, the codes only use one of the example code, the example data frame to demonstrate the t-test and the z-test. I don't know if that worked better. I'll ask Reno here, since Reno is here. I'll ask Reno if that slides demo codes actually work better to kind of. I think after we had a kind of one-on-one meeting, and we talked about that. And I think Reno had a pretty good idea of what to do, even by adapting code from the for loop. But afterwards, did you compare with that slides demo codes and see that probably would work better?
No, I haven't looked at demo codes yet.
Okay. Anyway, so anybody who is
familiar
with the slides demo codes, toward the end, I think it has some codes to demonstrate t-test and z-test using only one variable. And over there, you will see how to select one. And selecting the column means to slice it. Exactly. So you're not filtering any values. So you would use the slicing notation simply. Slicing one column would be one pair of square bracket, the one I just showed exactly at the beginning. So that's the way you do that. Other than that, any other questions?
I have one just regarding the syllabus. Are we still on track with the dates and the syllabus, or is that
with the storm we were pushed a little bit at least. So my hope is that I put the video on from last semester. I would cover the basically same content, but maybe with different flavor. With the in-person classroom, we probably expand a little bit on here or there. So the examples may be slightly different, but the concept will be very similar. If you have, I would like to require everybody to go through that, but it seems like I'm short on that. Cannot really do that, but I highly advise everybody to watch that video, at least in the middle, content portion, other than the Q&A, and go through or try to understand what I'm talking about. Next class, I'm going to try to, speed up and cover the key content, also bring up the video to remind other students to watch them. But either you watch it before next week or watch it after next week. It's something that I highly advise you to do. And besides that, on the timeline, I suggest that everybody watch the prep video, right? And also watch the other 6 or 7 homework assistance video. Even though they are homework assistants, they prep you. I mean, even if you watched it and you try to do homework all by yourself, it's going to be challenging again, because the process is so complex with the for loop of optimizing the model with even add-a-line model, multiple step points, multiple purposes, multiple matrix, equations. It's very complex. So you probably have to practice several times to entirely get the idea, and then a few more times to be really more familiar with it and be comfortable with it. So watch the homework assistance video. It's not kind of like cheating or something like that. Definitely not. It only helps if you're more familiar with those videos. So yeah, I'll slowly catch up the progress. The good thing is that the first exam only stops at the end of the logistical question. It will not touch anything about the neural networks. So we kind of have at least 1 week of leeway time over there. But with slowly catching up and with videos and offline learning, I feel that we can do it, bits by bits.
Thank you.
Oh, Professor Ma, yeah, I just checked. Cephas, yeah, the question 13 from the homework, that's like a similar example is on the slides demo 2. See, it's on slides demo 2.
Yeah, slides demo 2 toward the end.
Towards the end, yeah.
Right.
There are a couple
and
of
results,
tests.
Yeah, the results output are actually provided as pictures in the slides. So the slides and the slides code are corresponding to each other. So that would be a better example to adapt the codes to for these 2 specific questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So the homework is due next week's Friday, I think. The second homework.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see how we do on for next week. How well how much we can catch up. How comfortable we are with the pace.
Okay.
Homework can always be adjusted in terms of
right. Yeah, because I saw like there are like a lot of slides I have to go through for the logistic regression.
Right. Yeah. It's a process. It's the timeline of working through the optimization process. That takes some time to realize it. In the classroom, I'll try to go through questions mostly. So it will be hugely helpful if everybody is prepared with what they are working against. At least know what the resources you have. Ultimately, you have the video to go through and explain, to watch and rewind. But you also have these, like, let me stop the sharing. You have these. This is the, wait, see, it's blurry. Anyway, so this is a timeline with notes, and you also have a clean version without the notes. Without the notes, it shows the steps and concepts. With the notes, it shows the codes exactly. Or if not exactly the codes, there's little gap between the actual codes. As long as you understand the process and the notes, using this would be the best resource during the exam, especially during the exam. You know where to look and you know what to put on. And also, this is just a list view of the steps. So all of these are resources for all the models that we'll go through. The toughest model begins with add-a-line and then logistical regression, and then finally neural networks, multiple layers, super complex. The notes is full of the page, but in the end, almost all students can do it. Understand? Maybe after the exam, you finally have the feeling that you can put everything together. But the more practice you do before the exam, the better you're eventually. And these are quite mechanical, I would say. The process is mechanical. Computers follow a mechanical process. Understand that process, try to be mechanical. It's a rigid process overall. Any other questions?
Are those notes on Blackboard? That list of code?
It's all of these timelines and notes and are on the what page? Resource maybe, or something like that. Timeline.
Timeline. At the very beginning.
What is the page called on the sidebar?
I think it's timeline, like course timeline or something.
Oh, that's course timeline. I'm talking about the other things.
Yeah, it's right above the course content. So it's right there.
Be there. Let me search quickly.
Yeah, it's either on links or resources, something like that.
Yeah, resources definitely. Those are resources. Let me double check. So it's under all materials. There are slides, there are videos, and there are cheat sheets. Cheat sheets. That's cheat sheets. These are exactly cheat sheets, but there are resources that you can use. Yeah, it'll be helpful to print them out. Most of them can fit on the letter, but the biggest one, the neural net one, is the biggest with a lot of notes because it's just more complex. If you print on the letter size, it may be small. So take a look. If it's too small, print it on a bigger A3 letter size. You only need one. You only have to print one time, and take good care of it. Anything else? I think it's informative session. Agree?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I guess have a great night and enjoy study, and I'll see you next Tuesday. No storm, please.
Have a good night, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy the night.
Yeah. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Night, everyone.
Yeah, night. I'm going to end the meeting or leave the meeting.
Hello? Hello, sir? Hello? Hello? Anybody still on here? Dr. Sharma? It froze.